Everyone, welcome to the podcast. Today I'm joined by my guest Nick Hinton, author of the books The Saturn Time Cube Simulation and The Aquarian Singularity. Nick is also the host of the What If podcast and the founder of the Institute for Folly, an organization created to measure belief systems' effects on consensus reality. Nick is best known for his amazing threads on Twitter and Reddit about theories that question the nature of our reality. In today's episode, we're going to discuss one of his theories that first caught my attention, and that is his famous Twitter thread questioning whether or not the world really ended in 2012, causing the Mandela effect. Then we're going to discuss the key elements of his book, Saturn Time Cube Simulation, which connects dots between the simulation theory and the role of Saturn and time as a construct that only exists inside our minds. We're also going to talk about the concepts of Egregores, which are group thought forms, and how much of a significance do they hold in creating our consensus reality. Nick has experienced some really fascinating synchronicities in his life, and I'm going to ask him about a couple of the most mind-blowing ones, including one where he wrote a letter to God and God answered him. Having gone down so many different rabbit holes as Nick has, questioning the nature of our reality, I'm going to ask him about his current perspective on God and consciousness, including his view on Jesus. Who was the real Jesus and what was his true legacy? So if this sounds good to you, grab a cup of coffee or tea, sit back and relax as we go down some very interesting rabbit holes with Nick Hinton in search of truth about the nature of our reality. Welcome to the podcast, Nick. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Well, even before I started my podcast, I had in my mind a list of guests that I would love to speak to, and you were right up there. So I'm so excited to finally get you on my podcast and ask all my questions of you. So you're really popular on Twitter for doing these amazing threads where you basically give all different models of the nature of our reality, and you have this amazing way to synthesize information and be able to express clearly and concisely very complex concepts. I really feel that's your gift, and I came across your work for the first time when I was just on the internet like everybody else, and I stumbled
hmm
upon I stumbled upon your 2000 did the world really end in 2012 thread, and that was an idea that never come across actually, so I was really mind blown, and I had a read, and you made a very good argument to the fact that it could have happened that way, that the world actually ended in 2012 and we didn't even realize it. So then I found you on Twitter, and I went through all your threads. They're really
hmm
fascinating. They're really fascinating, and what I really love about you is that you correct me if I'm wrong, but you call yourself mystically agnostic. So what you're saying is that here's a theory. I'm not saying that this is 100% truth. It's just I've seen connected all these different dots, and they all can't be coincidences. So let's have a look at it and consider this possibility, because at the end of the day, things related to God, consciousness, the nature of our reality, we can really never really know for sure what actually is while we're still here. So I really like that about you. You're not just sort of tethered to any particular idea. You're constantly exploring and evolving, and I really like that.
Well,
So,
thank you. Yeah, you're like one of the very few people to pick up on that.
oh really?
The mystically agnostic thing. I mean, so many people will comment on the threads and say like, "Oh, this isn't true. This isn't true." I'm like, I'm not saying it's absolute truth, but yeah, that idea actually came from Robert Anton Wilson. I didn't come up with that, but he has a great book called Quantum Psychology, which is kind of about that concept. And basically, yeah, it seems that whatever model of reality you truly believe in, your consciousness and your brain's ability to find meaningful connections between things will start to try and prove that reality around you, if that makes sense.
No, that makes perfect sense. And I think once you go down these rabbit holes, you actually start to realize that perhaps your belief is what's creating your reality. So it's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you believe something, then it happens, and because it happens, then you're even more convinced that that's how
Right.
things are.
It's like an informational feedback loop.
Yes.
And that's why it becomes so hard for some people to change the reality, because their beliefs, if they hold them for long enough, they become super solidified through their experiences, and it becomes hard to see anything else. So that's when you have to start using those, different techniques of rewiring your brain, like affirmations and, some of those subliminal messaging tapes. I don't know. I haven't used those in quite a while because now I'm kind of skeptical of the stuff they're putting in there. But I do think that, those things can help you break out of any rut that you're in if you find the right tools, the right kinds of those things.
Yes, and I agree, and I'm on the same page with you about the subliminal stuff, because you can't hear it. It's so softly audible, like it's hardly audible. Then how do you know what they're what they say they're giving you is what they're giving you? So you can actually
Right.
you can probably make your own recordings. I reckon that if that's
Yeah, yeah.
at least that
That'd probably be
way.
the best way.
Yeah, and that way you know what you're getting. So yeah, no, that really I really appreciate that about you, Nick, that you are you're just considering possibilities, and you're not saying that this is exactly how things are. So with that said, I thought perhaps you could start us off with your that thread about, did the world really end in 2012, and also if you could talk a little bit about the CERN, for those who don't know what CERN is. That it's a site that is located in Geneva, Switzerland. And I've got here written down that CERN is the site of the Large Hadron Collider, the world's largest and highest energy particle collider in Geneva, Switzerland. So yeah, if you could sort of explain for anyone who has never heard of CERN, and also if you could also talk a little bit about Mandela effect.
Yeah, yeah. So it's been a quite a while since I have thought about the world ending in 2012 stuff, but I mean, basically, it was a thread I had. Someone had already wrote a thread about the world ending in 2012, and I was fascinated by it. They didn't include all of these things, but once I started to look into it, I started to find my own connections. As we were saying, like, you seek and you shall find.
Mm.
So I was finding all these new pieces of evidence, and eventually, um, I was looking for that thread again and just couldn't find it. So it kind of disappeared. And basically, I just wanted to rewrite it with my own findings in there, and repost it for people to read. And yeah, it went pretty viral. So it seems like a lot of people resonate with the idea. But basically, the smoking gun for me of that theory, the thing that I found, was that CERN had discovered the Higgs boson in 2012. They announced it in July, but I think they actually found it sometime earlier, because they don't make their announcements when they first find things. They test them and investigate them some more, and then eventually they'll make the announcement. But for those who are unfamiliar with CERN, like you said, it's a giant hadron collider. A hadron being you know a subatomic particle within an atom. And basically, what they're doing is they're beaming these subatomic particles around and around in circles, faster and faster and faster, until they reach nearly the speed of light. And when they collide together, they create, I guess, these mini explosions where they're looking for other subatomic particles that they think might exist, as well as trying to peek into other dimensions and recreate the conditions of the Big Bang. And uh, they also are trying to make mini black holes and just all sorts of weird stuff. So the theory was that in 2012, when they discovered this Higgs boson, they might have accidentally created a black hole that swallowed us all up in like a split second.
Mm.
And there are some physicists who say that it seems that we do live inside of a black hole. And Stephen Hawking said something along the lines of, if we ever found the Higgs boson or the God particle, we would disturb the entire field of reality, and it would cause it to evaporate faster than the blink of an eye. And so basically, that's where the theory comes from, is all those things. And the idea that once the universe was destroyed, we entered a parallel a parallel world, or another version of the earth in the multiverse, one that is slightly different but mostly the same. And that's where the idea of the Mandela effect comes from, which is this idea that certain things in the past or in history that we once thought were true are no longer true. And basically, it's not because we're misremembering, it's because the past has literally changed. And one of my favorite examples of this is Mirror Mirror on the Wall from Snow White. It's now Magic Mirror on the Wall. Yet you can find, prominent figures like Steve Jobs, who in some of his work was talking about Mirror Mirror on the Wall, or stuff that people might be able to relate to a lot more is like the Fruit of the Loom logo. A lot of people remember it having a cornucopia in the background, but it never did. Yet you can find newspaper articles and magazines that like reference the cornucopia despite it not being there. Or I'm not sure if you have Chick-fil-A where you live, but what's that?
No, we don't.
Okay, okay. Well, it's like a place that it's a place that sells like chicken sandwiches. But um back a few years ago, I used to drive past a Chick-fil-A every day on my way to work, and it was spelled CHIK, and I would pass it every day and be like, this is so stupid. I wish they would just spell it the right way. Well, now it is spelled CHICK. And that to me was one of the most mind blowing because I experienced it firsthand. I have those memories engraved in my brain of, being so pissed off at how stupid they were spelling it. So I hope that suffices.
Yeah, no, that's really good because one of the examples I had written down that blew my mind about Mandela effect, or sort of verify or validated that idea for me, was the magic mirror on the wall. Because I remember clearly uh, being, little and watching that Disney cartoon, the one that was made in the 1930s, Snow White, and where she clearly says, mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all. So what I did is when I heard that, I was like, well, yeah, that's how I remember it. So I went and had a look on YouTube, and somebody's actually posted a clip of Snow White, the Disney version from 1930s. And yeah, she clearly says, magic mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of all, or something, like even the last bit is different. So that
Hmm.
really, yeah, that really blew my mind. And you can see people's comments on that YouTube video clip where people are saying, like thousands of people are saying that, yeah, that's how I don't remember this version. I remember the older version. So yeah, that's really sort of you can't argue with that, can you? Isn't that sort of unarguably that's evidence? It's yeah.
Right. How is it possible that so many people could misremember?
Yes, exactly. And the more recently they had made a movie, The Snow White and the Huntsman, and in that one, they have with Charlize Theron and what's his name, Chris Hemsworth, and yeah, so in that one they also use the term magic mirror. So yeah, it's really confusing. So yeah, back to the yeah, did the world really end in 2012? So is your hypothesis that perhaps it just ended and we didn't even realize it, and now we are living in some sort of a ghost timeline, or it's just the reality just continues in some shape or form, and here we are?
Um, it does seem to me to be like a kind of a loop or like a reiteration of the past. Um, but I mean, obviously, we didn't have COVID or World War III or any of these crazy things. I mean, we've seen different um, instances of this, like with Ebola and Obama almost starting World War III and stuff like that. But it just seems like history has kind of stopped, and we're in this weird phase where everything is happening at once. And yeah, the original theory in the thread was that we're in some sort of simulation now. Um, I mean, so there was these people on 4chan, which is not that credible of a source, but it was just an interesting idea where someone claimed to be a CERN insider, and they said that, you know, we were all destroyed in 2012, And it was just funny that I'd found this because I was already on the trail of, writing this thread, and I ended up finding this other person talking about the same idea where they said that, yeah, the universe was destroyed and we were placed in a simulation within like a quantum computer or something. I don't really know what I believe about any of that. Like I said, I mean, you can't just trust like a random person doing a possibly fake interview with people on a internet forum. But um yeah, I mean, base like to put it more simply though, it does seem like everything drastically changed after 2012.
Because, I was one of those people that was aware of the 2012 prophecy, and that,
Right, right.
yeah, like a lot of people, I imagine. I mean, there could be somebody out there listening who may not know about the 2012 prophecy, but please correct me if I'm wrong. But I think the prophecy was that because of the Mayan calendar had ended, there was a prophecy that said that that's when the world is going to end. And of course, as the time came closer to, that particular date, I think was it the 21st of December 2012 that
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And it came and went, and we didn't feel any different in that moment. So um and I still remember knowing about that prophecy and kind of feeling, well, if the world is going to end, I'd rather be one of those people who just like we that I'm one of the ones who perish with the ending. Yeah, I don't want to be the one who survives, because I'd rather not live in that reality of Mad Max, where
Hmm.
yeah, it's just a horrible world that you would have inherited if the world did end, and then you're just in this barren landscape where people are struggling to survive. So I didn't want any of that, so I wasn't even trying to prep or anything. I didn't quite believe the prophecy, but I didn't quite discount it either, which is usually my position on everything that cannot be proven. That you can't dismiss it, but you can't completely sort of take it for granted. You can't completely be 100% convinced either, because there's just no proof at the end of the day. So I was just sitting on the fence, and I thought, well, it happens, then I'd rather perish, and you know what? I'm a eternal being, and I'll just end up somewhere hopefully nicer. So yeah, so it came and went, and nothing really happened. And now that we now it's 2022, and one of the things I can definitely say is that the world, everything has speeded up. Like everything's happening really fast, and it does,
Right.
yeah, it does make you question whether, is it because everything is running faster, is because of the fact that we are in a simulation now and we weren't before, or maybe we were already in a simulation and now we're in a simulation within a simulation. It's like a TV within a TV within a TV.
Right.
Yeah. So we're just in a more of a nested in loop where time just runs differently. Either way, it's not a very pleasant idea, is it?
No, but yeah, the thing about the 2012 the Mayan 2012 prophecy is that when the old world ended, we'd enter a new one. And that also plays into the whole like age of Aquarius thing where things become more fluid. So like I do believe that the nature of reality actually changed around that point in time where before time was more linear, but now it's more spaghetti. Like I think that there's always been a multiverse, but I feel like now it's more apparent, and it's being shown to us in subtle ways. And I think that's only going to become less subtle over time.
Yeah.
There's scientists that have like quantumly entangled different organisms. They're doing all sorts of weird stuff, and it's ironic that we're talking about this right now because CERN actually just turned back on at some point in March. So um,
What does that
I'm
mean,
not.
turn on? Were they off?
Yeah, it's been off for a while, and then they did some maintenance on it, and now they're turning it back on with double the power than they did previously. I don't remember exactly when the last time it was turned on, but it does seem like World War Three, like the whole World War Three narrative, seemed to line up with CERN reactivating. And the interesting thing about that is that CERN is also the scientists there are also using the machine to basically prove their theory of supersymmetry. Like they don't understand why the universe is not the model that they think works best. So in the supersymmetry model, there would be a completely even amount of antimatter and normal matter. However, if that were the case, the universe would have annihilated itself, because when matter and antimatter come together, they destroy each other and cancel each other out. So they're wondering, why is there a universe in the first place? So they're trying to study antimatter by bringing it into our world. And who knows? I'm not a scientist. I don't understand exactly what these experiments consist of, but I find it interesting that if this stuff really destroys matter, why would they be wanting to bring it here? And there's some people out there who believe that antimatter actually causes people to act crazy or lose their minds or go insane. And so, like, the fact that it was just turned back on and now people are losing their minds over this new thing again just seems extremely irrelevant to me.
Yeah, it's interesting because you know what that reminds me of, that movie, the one of the Thor movies, where they have this sort of like ether that enters Natalie Portman's body, and there's another they're trying, there's a convergence of universes that's gonna like destroy everything. I can't even remember the full plot of that, but it's interesting how a lot of the movies hint at certain things that end up being part of our reality,
Right.
isn't it? And I heard you say somewhere that you don't even watch the movies anymore because you
No.
just you just read the plots, the
Yeah, yeah.
synopsis. And is there a reason for that? Do you think by watching those movies, are we sort of consenting those type of ideas, and maybe there's some sort of agreement that we need to give on a conscious or unconscious level for these things to take place within our individual reality?
Possibly. I mean, I think what they're doing with the movies is basically the revelation of the method, which is where the magician tells you exactly what he's doing, but in a subtle way. Yeah, as if to get your consent, like, hey, I'm taking the money right out of your pocket, but you're not paying attention. And yeah, so basically in a way they are, some people would say that they're getting our consent to do all these messed up things. Um, but no, that's not the reason I don't watch them. Like, I do think that, I mean, it's part of the reason, because like if I watch a horror movie, I'm not scared by horror movies. Like, I know it's fake, but like I just leave, the TV set or the movie theater or whatever, just feeling gross and like kind of sad. Like, I hate looking at gore. I hate all that stuff. But honestly, like, I just don't like the idea of sitting down for 3 hours and watching a Marvel movie. Like, it's just so, it hurts my brain. Like, I don't want to spend my time that way. So to speed up the process and figure out all the symbolism, I'll just read about it real quick and be like, okay, this makes sense. This makes sense. This makes sense. This is what they're trying to say. But I really do believe that movies are like little sub realities, and they can get into people and basically hijack someone's consciousness in order to create their desired reality. And the interesting thing about these Marvel movies that talk about all of these crazy ideas is that a lot of them supposedly come from Jack Parsons' like crazy writings in his journal. And his name was actually Marvel Whitehead Parsons. And so some people say that Marvel's actually named after him.
So here's Jack Parsons. Sorry, I don't know much about I watched pretty much all the Marvel movies, but is he the writer of the comics or is he the producer?
No, okay. Okay, so Jack Parsons was a student of Aleister Crowley, occultist, but the weird thing about him is that he was also a NASA rocket scientist. He actually invented the rocket fuel that supposedly took us to the moon. He is the reason we have rockets at NASA today. And Jet Propulsion Laboratory is actually named after him, JPL, Jack Parsons Laboratory.
Right. Okay. Interesting. So yeah, I didn't know that connection with the Marvel comics. The movies and the comics as well. And I've always watched Marvel movies because I like the idea of having superpowers, and I feel like our human potential allows us to be so much more than what we actually are. But that's more of a positive spin on, I guess,
Right.
what could be a very dark subject. But yeah, who knows, with Hollywood, what their real intentions are in putting these stories out there, because they're really, Hollywood is really our version of in the old days, in the ancient times, people sit around a fire, and an elderly person will sort of share a story, and be like storytelling time at the end of the night, just form of entertainment. So I guess Hollywood is our modern day version of that, and they can give us any sort of, fill our heads with any type of stories that they want, and we just listen to it as entertainment. But is it just entertainment, or is it something more? It kind of begs that question.
Right, yeah, I mean, the movie screen is the modern version of, the cave wall with all the paintings. I mean, these movies are ultimately just the same archetypes of every myth that's ever existed. I mean, there isn't it seems like in this loop we're in, there isn't another possible story structure besides the hero's journey, which is, guy leaves for an adventure, travels to the abyss, is transformed, and then returns home. And we have all these characters throughout ancient mythology who all repeat the same pattern. That's basically what every movie is. And there's only so many characters you can come up with. I don't think any movie or any story we read is actually original. I think they're all the same ideas recycled over and over again, but with different masks, different stage props,
Yes.
etc.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's 100% true. Yeah, they're just recycling the same material, the same archetypes, so to speak. So let's move on to your other very popular thread, which then turned into a book because it's quite complex and there was just too much to cover in a thread. So you've written a book about it called the Saturn Time Cube Simulation. And it's a good one that ties in with the 2012 thread, because it's still got that idea of that we are in a simulation. And what I really found interesting about this theory is that it kind of gives us an insight into how time really operates. For a very, for a very long time, pardon the pun, we didn't understand time. And I think now we're getting a little bit closer to how really time functions and what time really is. So it sort of provides some sort of an explanation around that as well. So please tell us a little bit about that. I know it's a big subject, so we can, happy to have a little synopsis of it.
Yeah, so the Saturn time cube simulation theory came from the fact that, well, I was just digging through some weird rabbit holes on YouTube, and found this one guy who was talking about he didn't have a whole lot of followers or anything, and it was just him sitting on his computer talking to the computer with his parrot in the background, and he'd just yell and tell everyone they're dumb. But he was a little crazy, but it was honestly some of the most mind-blowing stuff I found, because I was only like 19, I think, when I found this. Um, so I was just mind blown and fascinated by it. But he was basically talking about how there's a hexagon on top of Saturn. And when I first heard about this, I was like, what the hell? How is no one talking about this? So I looked it up for myself, and yeah, I mean, I don't know honestly what I think of space or any images that come from NASA nowadays, but what NASA is saying is that there is a giant hexagonal storm on top of Saturn. And um, it just seems impossible, but it's supposedly true. Um, and I, was looking into this a little bit more and found out that in ancient mythology, Greek mythology, Saturn was equated with Kronos, the god of time. And basically, this is where it becomes somewhat of a stretch, but if you connect some lines on the inside of a hexagon, it becomes a two-dimensional view of a three-dimensional cube. I'm sure in school you remember doodling cubes on like a piece of paper or whatever, where you intersect two cubes and draw some lines inside of them, but ultimately it's the outline is of a hexagon. And so I don't oh yeah, so yeah, the reason I was, obsessed with this cube connection is because there's actually a lot of black cubic structures in architecture and ancient religions, and even, pop culture and movies, where there's this black cube that is able to manipulate time. Um, at least in the movies, that's what it does. But in ancient cultures, this cube was a symbol of Saturn. And, so that time connection in these Marvel movies, what we were just talking about, I'm sure you've seen the Tesseract in many of those. So the Tesseract is a four-dimensional version of the cube. And, a lot of scientists and physicists say that the fourth dimension might be time. So once again, you have this time cube idea. And basically, what I was trying to figure out when I was looking into all this stuff is Saturn somehow manipulating time? Is there some kind of machine in there creating this hexagon? Um, and like I said, there's just these black cubes everywhere. Like there's a black cube inside of the UN meditation room, which they call the altar to the God of everything. Um, there's that giant black cube at Mecca, which they call Kaaba, which people walk around counterclockwise, like the rings of Saturn, to worship their god. And yeah, so there's just a whole bunch of strange connections that I was picking up on, and it seemed like, yeah, I mean, Saturn, excuse me, was was the ultimate god in ancient times. So um, Saturn is the sixth planet from the sun. The hexagon is a six-sided shape. Saturn day is the sixth day of the week, the original Sabbath day. And so you have all these six connections, and I was thinking that Saturn sounds like Satan. The Bible tells us that Satan is the god of this world. So I was basically coming to the conclusion that the god of time is somehow ruling over this material world.
Yeah. And there is, so in that theory, so basically your starting point was the hexagon that appears on top of Saturn, which is potentially created by some sort of frequency, right? That you think might
Right.
be emitted from there to us, and that is somehow affecting our mind. So that's why time only, I think you've said somewhere, the time only exists inside our minds, and that's how we are
Right. So
controlled.
yeah. So like I said, it seems that we're stuck in kind of a time loop, which would explain the idea of the wheel of reincarnation or samsara, um, or like even the simulation where time doesn't really exist. It's just things are changing and rearranging, with the same story going over and over again, the same hero's journey plot. Um, but yeah, so basically, if you study cymatics, which is
Mhm.
this field of research that shows how sound actually affects matter, like scientists will play a certain frequency or tone next to like a plate of sand or even water, and the vibrations created by the certain frequencies will create certain shapes. So if you play a low frequency sine tone, it actually creates a hexagon. And so this led to the idea that, oh, there's got to be something inside of Saturn, potentially a wormhole to another dimension or a supercomputer or something that's emitting this low frequency sine tone. And the reason I found that connection interesting is because, I referenced the Bible earlier. This world is ruled by Satan, according to the Bible. And the root of all evil in this world is the love of money. And they say that money is time and time is money.
Mm.
Well, if you take a dollar sign and you flip it on its side, it looks exactly like a sine wave. And then if you remember in school when you were studying sine waves, you'd abbreviate it as sin. And the Bible says we're born into sin and that's why we die. Well, maybe what they're really saying is we're born into time and that's why we die.
That's
And
amazing.
and and there's the obvious, the sine wave looks like a serpent and so on and so forth. So yeah.
Yeah, there's so many dots there, isn't it? Like so many things connect up to it that it's quite
Yeah.
mind-boggling. As a theory. So with so Hollywood obviously again has a way of presenting these ideas or hiding them or putting them in plain sight. At times. So there is that idea of a tesseract in the Marvel movies. Where Loki's character, Thor's brother Loki, gets hold of tesseract and he changes timeline. And more recently, I think was it last year? Netflix came out with a spin-off from the Thor Marvel comics, movies, to that Netflix series called Loki, where it's literally all about time and how they Loki gets captured by an organization called TVA, which stands for Time Variance Authority. And basically, Loki spawned. He's been naughty. He spawned another timeline, and TVA's job is that they exist outside of time. It's a group that exists outside of time, and they try and maintain one single timeline. Because,
Hmm.
because in the past they had wars between multiple timelines. So in order to get out of that loop of being in a timeline war, their TVA's job is just to prune any timelines that start to occur in parallel. Very strange idea, but again, it alludes to that same theory of we might be in a simulation, that we're not meant to exist within time. We're basically set up here in an infinite loop. And perhaps, the Buddhist monks and the traditions of old have been trying to give us a way out of the simulation. You know how Buddhist monks, they do this chant that this world is the dream, so we just, and that, I mean, probably better this than I do, that, they're trying to give us the key to get out of this loop, basically. And, Elon Musk has also come out and said that he believes that we do live in a simulation.
Right. Real quick though, I do want to say I believe the TVA is a real concept.
Okay. So have you watched it? Have you read it, or
Yeah, I did not watch it. I read a little bit about it, but the thing I found super interesting, like I didn't read necessarily all through every single episode synopsis, but the idea of the TVA resonated with me because I'm not sure if you're familiar with my work on the Bledsoe family.
I am a little bit, yes.
Okay, so for people that don't know, the father of the family is a famous UFO abductee. And when he was first abducted, this guy came to their house from the CIA and NASA and all these other different organizations and agencies or whatever. But he basically told them that if they wanted to understand his job better, that they should watch the movie Adjustment Bureau. Have you ever seen that?
No, I haven't, but I have heard a lot about it. Do you
Okay.
recommend it?
Yeah, I do. That's one I actually have watched, and it's based on a novel by Philip K. Dick, who I'm obsessed with. But basically, the whole point of the movie is that this guy is deviating from his destiny or his fated path, and there's basically this group of dimension jumping men in black who orchestrate little coincidences in his life, as well as roadblocks and other things to keep him going according to plan. And so I just found it super odd that this guy told the Bledsoe family, like, hey, if you want to understand my job better, you guys got to watch the Adjustment Bureau. So I do think that there are forces out there that try to keep everything going, quote unquote, according to plan. And maybe that is so they can keep us in a loop or something. Maybe when we deviate too much and create all these branching timelines, it fucks up their soul trap or whatever. I'm not really sure.
Interesting. Because you know what this reminds me of, one of my friends, they went through a really difficult time, and during that time they were basically, I know it sounds a bit crazy, but they were able to talk to Jesus. Like
Doesn't sound crazy. Nothing does
yeah,
anymore.
yeah, yeah, that's right. It doesn't sound crazy to me, but I mean, to some people it might. But he basically, was Jesus was like literally helping him, and he would see him. And one time he shared this experience with me, which I really found profound. And I think it's really important to remind us of these things time to time, that we are not powerless in all of this. That we do have ways to be empowered rather than disempowered by these infinite loops that we might be existing within. And basically in that experience that my friend shared with me is that he said that Jesus showed him something. So what he showed him, that over our planet, like if you look up in the sky, there's an invisible dome, like a transparent ceiling. And he showed him that when people have duality thoughts, they basically go up into that dome. They shoot up into that, like from their body, it shoots up into the dome and it ricochets back here. But when somebody then he showed him that when somebody has a loving thought, it actually goes up, it shoots up again, but it actually goes right through that dome.
Wow.
Yeah. So I
That's
felt
pretty cool.
that's pretty cool, isn't it? And I've never really shared this with anyone before. I can't believe I'm actually doing it on a podcast, where so many people are watching it. But I just felt guided to share that for whatever reasons, that we are being shown by masters and enlightened beings who have come before us to show us a way out of here. And I think ultimately it's love, because that's why love feels so good. When you're in that loving vibe, the world just seems better. So it's
Yeah, it
important.
opens up to you.
Yeah, exactly. So anything that feels good must be good. And love always feels the best of all the emotions you can possibly have. So yeah, I just felt guided to say that here for whatever reasons. I don't know. But I
No,
forgot.
it's really interesting because I was going to bring up Jesus, but thought maybe I shouldn't, just because I don't know what your audience is like. So it's just it's a funny little synchronicity for me.
Oh, really? Because yeah, no, I guess I hope my audience is like me, that they're not tethered to any particular philosophy, religion, or idea. They're open to learning from everything and anything, and being always open. And and that, because that's how I am, and that's why I appreciate what you said, what I was saying about you in the beginning about you being mystically agnostic, because I think being mystically agnostic allows you to constantly learn and evolve. Because if you become too tied to one idea, then you don't really know if that idea is 100% true, and then you won't evolve, I feel. So that's
Well,
my.
yeah, and I feel like when you rigidly stick to one model of reality, it's almost like the world becomes fossilized right in front of you.
Yes.
And experimenting with different models of reality has definitely led to extremely magical synchronicities for me. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's very fun to experiment with different beliefs because you might just end up seeing them manifest, and then you're like, okay, well, if that worked, let's try the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And life is never boring.
Yes.
So if you're bored, it's because you're not interested in enough things. There's an infinite amount of things to become an expert in.
Yes.
So
Because yeah, and I think ultimately more important than the answers are the questions. So you have to be always questioning, you know,
right, and
and
and if you don't read enough things, you don't even know the right questions to ask. So
yeah,
it
and
does. It's easy to get stuck in a loop, but yeah, you just gotta branch out.
yeah, and I think what happens, the danger of being, that the thing that I said about a self-fulfilling prophecy is that if you really believe 100% in something, you will make that happen. And if you make it happen, then you could go down two ways. You can be like, how you are, where you're like, I wonder where is this how the universe works? Whatever you believe can come true. So maybe I can believe this or that. Or you could be like, see, this is the truth. This is 100% truth. It's like you're proving yourself by your own belief system, but it's not true because it's true. It's true because you believe in it. If you know what I mean.
Right, and I honestly think that there must be some sort of great awakening, not in the QAnon sense, but just some sort of like, I guess, spiritual evolution, like a sped up one going on right now, because I honestly think that the final gatekeeper before enlightenment, at least in our current zeitgeist, is conspiracy theories. And it seems like the people that are experiencing all of their wackiest theories seem to manifest right in front of them. Maybe that's just because we're all being shown the mirror of everything we've been studying for so long. And now it's time to reclaim our power, I guess.
Yes, exactly, and that's why I don't even like to use that word anymore, conspiracy, because it has such negative connotations. I just call something a theory, because that's what it is at the end of the
Right,
day,
right.
right? It's a theory. We're not really sure, but it's like, if you truly believe, if you 100% believe anything that you read or hear, then you'll probably, the universe will act as a mirror to you, and it will probably come to, fruition in your life. So it becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy kind of thing. So that's why you got to always take everything with a pinch of salt and be all like, this is how I live anyway. That I believe that I will never, I can never really know 100% truth. And if I ever start believing that I know the 100% truth of everything, then I basically that's worse than dying, because that's like you'll
Yeah,
stop growing, because you've fooled yourself into thinking that you have all the answers. So more important than the answers are the questions. And
I
you have to
agree.
constantly be questioning. So I think this is a good segue into a couple of concepts that you talk about quite frequently, or maybe I've just heard them through you. But the first one is a word I actually never heard of, which is egregore and consensus reality. So please talk us through those concepts and how do you think they affect us in our global reality, in our personal reality?
Okay, so an egregore is basically an idea that is believed in by two or more people, I guess. And so basically the idea is if a bunch of people come together and they start believing in a concept, it'll actually turn into a psychic life form and, take on a life of its own.
Mm.
And this idea is kind of shown in corporations. A group of people come together and they have this vision and this idea and it comes to life, and then it ends up taking on a life of its own where people no longer listen to people within the corporation. They just listen to the corporation's rules. They're like, no, 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 this is required of the corporation, da 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 da. Or it's even shown in memes where, someone posts a funny meme and then it goes viral, and then, it evolves and evolves, and it becomes its own character. But some people think that some of the gods people believe in are possibly egregores. If enough people believe in this archetype, it actually becomes real in the astral realm or something, and they're able to communicate with this new form of intelligence that they created, and it's as powerful as they believe it is. And so the idea of consensus reality is something similar, where basically the truth of reality is what the majority believes to be true. So it'd basically just be like a group of egregores. Um, but yeah, so if you do not believe what the majority believes, you kind of are considered to live in your own little world. I'm trying to think of a better idea to come up to explain consensus reality, but it seems to be like everything we considered a given in life is not actually a given. It's just something we believe is true, and that's why it's solidified, so solidified in our world. You know, we all believe gravity works, so it does. I mean, maybe it's not that extreme, but I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. It's like the collective consciousness creates its own reality in a way because we are, this collective consciousness or particles that are connected to each other. And that, I guess that's how brain entrainment happens as well. That we've all noticed when we hang out with certain type of people, we start to become like them. We start to think like them. Because
Yeah, and I was just gonna say real quick that like our the neurons in our brain that actually decode the sensory information coming in, through our senses. Um, all the information that is decoded through our neural network and shapes the reality we see in front of us. It's actually arranged based on the language we speak. So sometimes I think about, how we don't even realize where our language comes from. And I wonder if like the language we speak is actually morphing the reality around us. It's actually like we're decoding it through the lens of language. And I just wonder what would happen if we all created our own language or just stopped speaking altogether. Maybe that's why monks take a vow of silence. But
mm,
it's just an interesting idea.
oh yeah, I hadn't thought of that. Yeah, that vow of silence. I wonder if that kind of stops things manifesting in your reality, unconsciously.
Hmm.
You don't even realize. And what that reminds me of is that when you're in a dream, or like if you lucid dream, that when you ask for something to happen, it just sort of happens instantly. So it's almost like your words have more power in your dream time, and
Hmm.
they transfer the manifestation through the power of your word happens almost instantly. So there's no reason why it doesn't happen in our waking time. Just it happens a little bit more slowly, so we don't really pay attention to it as much, or we don't realize we're doing it. But there is something,
Right.
yeah. And not to get biblical on people, but or talking about, but in the Bible, that's how they say God created, the universe. He spoke the word, so the word carries, so
Right.
sound. So the sound has the power to turn energy into matter. You could argue that.
Right.
So
And a lot of people are aware of this now, but like, um to make a word you have to spell it. And so words are in a way spells. And I think that's why affirmations work. You say something over and over and over again, eventually it will create that spell and bring that thing into your reality. But I think, yeah, we're not supposed to instantly manifest things here, because if we did, it would just be even more of a mess than it is
It
now.
would be total chaos. I'm so glad
Hmm.
that doesn't happen, because we're not able to control especially our negative thoughts.
Right.
That inner dialogue that we have. So yeah, it would be an absolute nightmare if it was instantaneous. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, but no, there is that. Totally believe that sound is really powerful. So, and then again, ties in back with the idea of cymatics. How when a certain frequency or sound is produced, these patterns are formed, these shapes. So obviously, that shape is sound influencing matter. So
Hmm.
it's a real thing. So yeah, it's really interesting. So with the idea of consensus reality and egregores, how can we use this in a positive way to influence the world that we live in, or can we even do that, or should we just it's only always our individual reality that we can influence?
Oh, I mean, I think we can 100% affect the collective. Um, I just think it takes a lot of inner work to get to that place. I mean, you have to kind of, at least to some extent, become a master of your own reality before you can start influencing, the whole reality. I mean, granted, there are a lot of people out there that I don't think have done that, that are their words carry a lot of weight. But I like to compare the idea to, um, like throwing a stone into the ocean. So, like, if you have a golf ball sized consciousness and you throw that into the ocean, it's going to create a little splash. But if you expand your consciousness to the size of a boulder, you're going to create waves. And I think that's how, these enlightened masters or whatever, how they're able to carry their message through thousands and thousands of years and they still resonate with us to this day. I think that might have something to do with how that works. Um, but yeah, as far as like mastering your own reality goes, I mean, that's a never ending process. And I think we all go through ups and downs constantly to get us to possibly to a place where we're like, hey, I've learned how to manifest everything I want. And I've learned how to master not having negative thoughts to not manifest horrible circumstances. And now I just don't want anything. And I'm going to live at the top of a mountain and shut up and maybe ascend out of this time loop. But maybe that's the whole point of learning to manifest things. It's you go through the horrible phases to learn what you don't want, you learn what you do want, and then you start getting those things. And you're like, oh, well, this isn't the meaning either. And then you just kind of check out. You get to
Yeah.
exit the game at that point.
Yeah, and I think that's why some people are just born with that idea of that they just don't want to like the material world doesn't have any fascination for them. They just literally just want to go and live on a mountain from a very early age. So they probably reached their soul has probably reached that point where they've been there, done that, and now they're ready for the next step. And then
Right.
yeah, and that's how I guess enlightened beings are, created.
Hmm.
They're ready for that, and we all will be ready at some stage. And I think maybe this is a good point for me to then ask you about couple of your synchronicity stories, because I think there were a couple of them that I found. I mean, you got a lot of them, but I chose two of these because I really felt that they were so profound and obviously mind blowing in their nature, that the fact that they're so synchronistic. And so I'd love for you to share them with us. So for those out there who don't know what a synchronicity is, it's basically a word that was coined by Austrian psychologist Carl Jung, and I've got a little description written here from him, where I think this is a direct quote from him. He says, "Synchronicity reveals the meaningful connection between the subjective and objective world." And I think he also referred to synchronicity as something deeply meaningful, where deeply meaningful coincidences happen, which seemingly mysteriously occur in our life. So you had one where you wrote a letter to God and God answered you. So please tell us about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. So that one, I think nothing has really topped that so far. And like I said, when I first got into the Saturn time cube stuff, I was like 19, and around the same time, I was also getting into the words create reality stuff and everything like that. And I was just really confused and really pissed off at the world, honestly. And I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna do an experiment. If words create reality, I'm gonna write a story about me writing a story. And in the story within a story, I wrote a letter to God, and I was just demanding answers. I like, listen, God, I'm freaking pissed. I don't know what's going on. And you know the truth. There's just too much out there, and none of this makes sense. I just don't understand. And I don't understand why there's pain and suffering and blah, blah, blah. And I think it was a week or two later that I was going to work. And at the time, I was working at a greenhouse. And there was this lady there named Janice who, she always just wanted me to interpret her dreams. And so, but this particular day, she was like, "Oh, hey, like my friend's having dreams now." And she told me they were about a person named Nick. And so I told her about you and said how you interpret my dreams and blah, blah, blah. And she, at first, this lady who was having dreams, she thought they were about her son, but it just didn't feel right because her son was named Nick. But once Janice told her about me, she was like, okay, this is the Nick I need to talk to. So Janice asked me to go to her house. This lady was a roommate. And she's like, will you come to my house after work and meet my friend? And I was like, yeah, sure. And so I go over there. And when I get there, this lady, first we talked a little bit, but then she starts praying over me, anoints my forehead with oil, and tells me all these different things. And then before I leave, she hands me a little folded up piece of paper and says, "This is a letter from God." And in that moment, I was a little bit mind blown because I was like, "Is this like my story?" But when I opened it up, was where I knew it was no longer just a coincidence, because it said, read Jeremiah 3 through verse 33:3. And I was already dealing with my synchronicities of seeing the number 33 all the time. And so it just seemed like this message was for me. But then, to make it even more intense, when I finally read the passage, it says, call unto me, and I shall answer unto you all great and unsearchable things you do not know. And that's where I kind of lost my shit, because I was like, this is exactly what I asked God. And this is the most clever answer he could have possibly come up with. This is the most godlike response that, you could receive. And honestly, I think it's too smart for someone to make up. So that was my letter from God story. And yeah, I actually experienced another synchronicity dealing with that recently. I started going to church again. And when I went to church, some guy had a very similar story where he said, he had a vision where he saw a cloud, and a phone like connected to the cord dropped out of it, and God told him to call him, and he said his number was 333. And in my head, I was like, if he says this freaking verse, I'm gonna be freaked out. But that's what he did. He said, "Oh, I called the number 333, and God said, call unto me, and I shall show you all great and unsearchable things you do not know." But yeah, so that story was,
Wow.
yeah, definitely one of the most intense things, and that's what made me believe that it could have been an egregore or a manifestation, but it made me truly believe that there is a higher power, a God, an intelligent designer of this whole thing, because things like that don't just happen.
Yeah, I agree. And it can't just be an egregore, because it's not as though you were thinking about it. You just wrote a letter, and you just, in your time of need, and you just then obviously moved on. You were just living your life. It
Yeah, I
wasn't
forgot
like,
about it.
yeah, it wasn't like an affirmation you were doing every single day that would have manifested itself into reality. And yeah, no, I think I love that synchronicity story, and thank you for sharing that. And the fact that you recently had something, kind of that reminds you of that story in the first place. I think it's very, there's something there. It's
Yeah,
like
I think God's always talking. We just have to listen. We have to shut up long enough to hear him, like the monks
exactly.
are.
No, exactly. And that links to the next story I wanted you to share with the audience, which is you've vlogged about it on your YouTube channel. And it's about, I guess it's a story which is proof of, in a way, proof of God answering our prayers. And this towards the end of your, when you share that story with us on your YouTube channel, you say something that really hit my heart. And I'm going to quote you directly from there. You said at the end of that story, you said, God was seeking me long before I decided to seek him. And the reason that really hit my heart is because I felt like that sums up beautifully how many of us feel in our personal relationship with God. That God has always been searching for us. It's just that, we only think of him when or him or her or it in our time of when we feel very challenged. So
Right.
please share with us, the one I'm talking about, where you asked
Yeah,
for
yeah.
help. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so this one's pretty personal, so I'm not gonna share every single detail, but I'm pretty sure I know which one you're talking about. But basically, this was when I was going through, another valley because, like I said, it's a sine wave. It goes up and down all the time. But I was in another one of my valleys, and basically at the time, I was I was doing cough medicine with my friend, and basically to try and escape reality. But I think it was in the same period of that letter. So I was like 17 or 19 in between there. And I'm 27 now for reference. But so basically I started talking to God. Like I left the kid's house and I just started going for a walk. Because I didn't like the environment. It was dark and gross, and I was just like, I need to get out of here. And so I was like kind of tripping a little bit, but I was still a little bit sober. But I started talking to God. I was like, God, if you're real and you're looking down on me right now, you're probably thinking like, what an idiot. And I just was kind of ashamed of myself. But I said a prayer and, just asking for help. And basically, I don't know if it was my intuition or just my subconscious or actually God, but basically something told me like, hey, just walk up to the church at the top of the street. And it was actually a church that it's near my friend's house, but it was the one I used to go to as a kid. Like I wasn't raised religious, but every Christmas and Easter, my family would go just for tradition's sake, I guess. Um, and so I walked up there and I knocked on the door of the house behind it because that's where the pastor lived or the priest or whatever. And he answered. He told me to come in, and we went back to his like little library and just talked and talked for like probably an hour, maybe two. And at the time, I was so deep into like weird stuff. I was like defending Lucifer. I was like, but don't you think he was the good guy? Like he was the first revolutionary, the first musician, the first artist, the first guy to say no. And I was just so confused. I didn't really know what to believe. And because of the way the world was, I was like, but God puts us through pain and misery, and I just don't get it. But anyways, he talked to me, and he wasn't mad that I was bringing up these ideas at all. He was really nice. And but at the very end of our conversation, he was like, "What was your name?" And I was like, "Nick." And he's like, "Nick what?" And I was like, "Nick Hinton." He's like, "No way." And I was like, "Why?" He's like, "Well, I heard your name from somebody, and they said you were going through a hard time. So I prayed for you, and I prayed you'd seek me out for guidance." And I was like, "Well, here I am." And I was mind blown by that too.
That is amazing. Like, what are the chances of that happening? That he found you asked for help, and he also asked you to find him, and you found him.
Right. I mean, granted, in a small town, it is kind of possible, but still, I mean, to me, it felt extremely magical. I mean, the chances that I would even go there are slim.
Yeah, no, I definitely, I was blown away by that synchronicity when you were sharing it. And it is to me proof of that God does answer our prayers when we're in that when the prayer comes from the heart. It always gets answered. I truly believe that, and I've got my own experiences in my life that I know, for this to be too many experiences for this not to be true. um,
Right, right.
yeah, so you mentioned earlier that you wanted to speak about Jesus. So I actually had part here just reserved for asking you questions about God and consciousness, because the the curiosity I have is that you've gone and explored all these different models of the nature of our reality, and with all the research that you've done and from where you are right now, what do you believe about God and consciousness, and also about the story of Jesus? Who was he really, do you think, from what you know today, and what was his true legacy?
That's a loaded question.
Yes. There's a lot there. Yes, I mean, just from what you feel right now, because
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
constantly evolving.
I mean, from my own personal experience, like, you know, I I've recently, 2021, the very beginning of it was a very high peak for me. It was amazing. It was one of the most fun times of my life. Um, and I just thought like nothing could possibly happen to bring me back down. I thought it was just going to go up and up and up. But I ended up kind of driving myself crazy because I was working on this third book, which just goes into some pretty disgusting rabbit holes. I mean, the rabbit hole of conspiracy gets so dark that yeah, it's just not good for your mental health. I don't think it's not good to focus on, but I think some of the things in there are very important and need to be known. Um, but during this time of researching these things, I just felt like maybe it was delusion or just paranoia, but I felt like I was being messed with. And I had kind of some physical evidence to back that up. Like there was one time I had sleep paralysis when this person was hovering over me like that. And I was all freaked out. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I was trying to rock myself back and forth. And then I just said, Jesus, Jesus. And everything went back to normal. Like I was able to move. So who knows? Could have been, um, just my own mind playing tricks on me. But that was, that was the only thing that saved me in that moment. And, just going to church in general makes me feel better. I mean, there's just people there that understand the struggle of life, and they truly care about you, and they want to love you. They want to welcome you without being judgmental. And that's not the case with every church. I mean, throughout my life, I've gone to many, many churches where they just treated me like I was crazy. Um, but I do have another funny synchronicity story that recently happened in June. Um, August was probably the darkest point of all this stuff. But before that happened in June, I was still seeking God and stuff like that. I mean, I'm just always looking for the answer. And at the time, I was living near a university, and I would go there all the time to sit at the library and do my reading and writing there. And there was this kid I met there named Musa, and he was a Muslim, and he would always beg me to go to the mosque with him. And we were like good friends and stuff. We would talk about philosophy together. He was a philosophy student. Um, but yeah, he believed the Quran was the whole truth and everything like that. And I would just be like, listen, I don't have a problem with your religion, but I just don't want to go. Like, I don't know. I'm hesitant. It makes me feel weird. I think people would look at me funny. And, I just don't really believe in organized religion at all, whether it be Christianity, Islam, whatever. But anyways, one day he finally convinces me to go. I'm like, fine, just to make you happy, I'll go. And so there's this guy there, one of Musa's teachers. They call him a sheik, I think. And like we talked for about an hour after prayer and reading the Quran and stuff. And like I told him all about my books and stuff and what they're about, and the Black Cube, obviously. Um, and like I didn't even really want to. He told me that Musa was always talking about my book, so he really wanted to know. And I was like, okay, I'll tell you. But he like ended up saying like, oh, I think you're like a young Sufi, and I want to pray over you and do all this stuff. So like it was a really good experience. And like this guy, like I don't know, there's something about his aura. Like I was like, okay, whatever power he's tapping into, I believe that's real. Like it doesn't have to be Christian God, it doesn't have to be Muslim God. It's just I'm starting to think it's just the structure of religion gives you the discipline to seek that power. And so every different religion's a stepping stone to the same place. But anyways, after this prayer and stuff, like I took down a few of the other students' phone numbers, and I kept going. I went for a couple times throughout the next couple weeks. And there was one day where a someone they considered to be a saint was visiting, and he was there to give a speech, and he got up there and he started talking, and he was like looking at me the entire time, and it just felt so weird. And he was talking about, like, I try my best to be humble and not arrogant, but he was just talking directly to me. He's like, the guy who thinks he's a genius needs to follow the path of everyone who came before him, to follow the guy that's already walking the path he wishes to walk. And if someone wants to be successful in the material world and they're a writer or something, they can't just focus on being in the real world. They have to focus on the spiritual world too, but they can't be all in the spiritual world because they'll drown there. So man has two wings, and he needs to have balance in order to fly, and all this different stuff. And he was just looking at me the entire time. And I was like, dude, this is making me feel so uncomfortable. And I looked over at Musa and I was like, did you tell this guy about me or something? And he's like, no, I thought you might have introduced yourself. I was like, no. So we're just
Wow.
looking at each other like, what the hell? And when the speech is over, he walks directly to me. He's like, hey, I just wanted to apologize. I didn't, if I made you feel uncomfortable, that wasn't my intention. He was like, I just, something in my heart, told me to say all that to you. And I knew it was a message to you. And I want to give you some advice. And I was like, okay, what's the advice? And he's like, well, the first hadith says that, these are like sayings of the prophet, I think. but he says, the first hadith says that a man shall get whatever he intends. It's all about intention. And so if you truly intend in your heart to find the truth, you will find it. So stop worrying about it. And my second bit of advice to you is don't become a Muslim. And then he laughed and walked away. And I was just like, what the hell is going on? And I looked over at Musa and I was like, see, I told you I wasn't converting. But that was just crazy. And so, yeah, I studied comparative mysticism in college. And basically, what my professor would tell me is that all the mystics reach the same end. Like they will, after years and years of discipline and prayer and meditation and serving their community, eventually they'll meet their God, but they'll get past that and they'll reach the void of creation, which is just nothingness. And I've always found that idea interesting. I'm like, how can everyone see the same exact thing at the very end? Maybe it really is many rivers all rivers lead to the same ocean. Maybe it is that way. But to me, yeah, Jesus, that's what I kind of believe in right now. He saved me multiple times in multiple different situations that I don't care to get into right this moment. I am writing about them in the book, but yeah, they're very personal. So it's actually really weird to write about them. I'm trying to be more honest and stuff like that. But yeah, that's where I'm at.
Yeah, that's really profound, and it really, I'm on the same page about how you feel about organized religion. And I've always, from a very early age, been quite sort of free spirited, in the sense that I've never liked the idea of being tethered to one idea or philosophy or religion, because I always had this inner knowing that it limits you in a way that's probably not healthy for you. And I've always had this idea that none of all the religions have truth in them, but none of them have 100% truth. So what
Right.
yeah, sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say, I've always compared it to like different rays of the sun. Like it all comes from the same source, but each ray of the sun hit a different continent. And so we have all these different, what were you going to say?
No, that's a beautiful analogy. I love it.
But yeah, I just never understood how, like, because Musa was begging me to go to his mosque because he said it was like his duty, to save me from hell. And I'm thinking like, well, dude, over at my Christian church, they argue with me about the same thing. Like, if you don't get serious, you're going to go to hell. I'm like, how can who's actually going to hell in this situation? Is it Musa or my friends at the church? I don't know. So, and I don't think any of them are, so.
Yeah, and I think all the religions have good intentions behind them, but of course, anything organized gets corrupted by power and money and all of that, as we all know. So I feel like
Right.
my journey has always been to, be able to look at all religions and basically cherry pick the ideas that resonate with me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you'll often find, when you do that, that all religions actually have this golden thread of truth that runs through all of them. So you take from everything what makes sense to you or what resonates you, and you can ignore the rest. And and for some people, it suits them to be part of a particular religion. Maybe that's what their soul just needs at this point. They need that discipline and structure. And for some of us, we are able to look at all religions and find the seeds of truth in it. So yeah, that's really profound story, because Sufism is a beautiful branch of Muslim religion. I think a lot of poets like Khalil Gibran have been have mystics from that tradition, have written beautiful poetry and meaningful words about nature of our reality. And yeah, so it's very enriching to your life if you can come across those teachings and wisdoms of mystics of all traditions. But yeah, with Jesus, I'm always curious. I always have this this idea that Jesus was so much more than what we have been taught about him. And I have this eternal curiosity as to what his life would have been like. If he could talk to me directly, what would he say? I just have this.
Right.
Yeah, he just thinking about him just fills me with this kind of beautiful energy.
Yeah, I mean, if I always, when I'm reading the New Testament, like Jesus' words just resonate with me, so powerfully, and like I just feel in a better mood if sometimes I'll stop listening to music and I'll just, like, if I'm driving, I'll turn on like just the Bible audiobook or something, and like it just feels so much better in the car. It's
Yeah.
weird, but one of my favorite ideas lately, and this is getting like kind of new agey and away from religion, but it feels right to me. But I don't know if that's because, you know, these false beliefs are supposed to feel good or something. But this is just an idea I've been entertaining. I don't know if I really believe it, but it feels kind of right. Philip K. Dick was talking about how um, basically this world is, we're all God and this world is our creation. So God created something that was so complex and so amazing that he actually got lost in it and forgot who he was and now is trying to get back out. But the paradox of that is that God only came back in here to get the rest of himself back out. So the fact that we're in this life right now is actually voluntarily, and everyone around you see is the savior, but he needs saving himself. And so I
Mm.
think that's a beautiful way to put exactly what Jesus was saying, treat everyone as you would treat yourself and love your neighbor and love your God. That's the most important commandment. And we're supposed to love everyone as we love God and ourselves. So like, I don't know, it makes so much sense to me, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that's 100% true, but that idea is fascinating to me, that we're basically God with amnesia and we
Yeah.
came back here to get ourselves as well as everyone else back out.
There is something to that because, there is that school of thought that we are God and we've just forgotten. And every person that we come across is an aspect of us, also a representation of God. But I think, and it's really hard to know what really is true. But I think one thing I can probably say with confidence that it always comes back to love, doesn't it? That
Hmm. Hmm.
it's all if you can anchor that loving feeling and energy in your life, you just feel more connected. You feel more connected to God. You feel more connected to, I don't know, all things that really fill you up with joy and happiness. It's just like that's the only recurring theme that I can think of in
Well,
all of
there is one caveat to that, and that's that it seems Christianity is the only religion that requires one to confess that one person is their savior, and that's Jesus Christ. And but I get caught up on the idea that the name Jesus Christ didn't even exist back then. So is it the intention? Is it the egregore? I don't know. But
Mm.
it seems to me that faith is the antithesis or the anti. How do you fucking say that word? I'm sorry.
Antithesis.
Yeah, it seems. I just took away from that whole serious spiel, but it seems to me that faith is the antithesis of knowing or gnosis, or so like trying to save ourselves by seeking this forbidden knowledge. I do think it drives people crazy at some point. And so like I just love the idea of faith. It's like I'm okay with not knowing. I just have faith that I'll be saved from this, whatever this is, the simulation, this purgatory. Maybe it's just the regular world. I don't know. But like I just have faith.
Yeah, and I think faith is basically believing in something without when there's no evidence for it, and
Exactly.
yeah, and for me, I have faith in things that I I'm where it's my inner compass that's telling me that this is how it is. So it's just an inner knowing, and that inner knowing
Right.
is, yeah, it's a very elusive thing. Like I don't know where it comes from, but it's just there.
So like whether Jesus was real or not, the faith is what makes him real, if that makes sense.
Mm. Or maybe he is real, or
Right, right. I do
yeah.
believe he was real, but I'm just saying the belief is what makes him real in your own life.
Oh yeah, and the thing is, either way, we'll never really know because that's the nature of our questioning. The
Hmm.
questioning things that we can never really prove. So it could be 50-50 either way. We just don't know. But I really feel like I just if I could time travel to any time in history, I would like to go to the time of Jesus and really find out what was going on, and what was his life really like? Who was he really? That's something that I always think about a lot. So I'm always
Yeah, that's a perfect answer. I've been asked so many times when I would time travel to, and I usually say Atlantis, but no, I'd definitely time travel to the crucifixion to see what happened.
and not let that happen. It's like, how dare you do that to him? Yeah, I would just like to sit and chat with him, just like a regular person. I'm very envious of all his disciples who got to hang with him.
Yeah,
Yeah, can you
yeah.
imagine hanging out with Jesus? That would be so cool. So with so you are a philosopher, and you're a young philosopher at that. So who are the people that who are the other people or philosophers that inspire you, who have made the most impact to your journey?
Hmm. Um, I really like Camus and Nietzsche, and Carl Jung was kind of a philosopher in a way. Um, but honestly, I studied a lot of philosophy in school, but I'm kind of getting away from that. I think, like I said, that basically the philosophies of men lead to more madness and more questions and answers. It's just basically people using pretty words to arrive where they first started over and over and
Mm.
over again. There's never any solutions really. But it is fun to read and fun to do, to philosophize. Um, but yeah, I mean, like I said, I think, I've been in a weird spot currently where I'm not really digesting anything anymore. I'm just writing my story. And then I think once I'm done with that, I'm going to kind of take a break from all this craziness and just enjoy the world a little bit. Not in like, not in like a way where you just go out and be mindless, but just, more simple things, because I've been so focused on all these crazy ideas that ultimately, like I said, they bring you right back where you started. It's like,
Mm.
okay, so I went down the rabbit hole and I figured out at the bottom of the rabbit hole is that there is no answer. So why did I have to do that? I could have just skipped the middleman and been simple the whole time. But for some of us that's not good enough and we have to do that. And I think that adventure is worth it, and it is meaningful. But it's just funny how ultimately you arrive exactly where you started when it's all said and done.
Yeah, it's a full circle moment. I think it happens to all of us that we need to go through a certain experience to arrive on the other end of it. So you can't. It's like a life is a spiral. You come back to the same point, but you come back at a higher octave of that spiral.
Right. Yeah. Time is a flat circle, but if you saw that in 3 dimensions, you would notice that the flat circle is actually a spiral going up and up and up.
Exactly. So if there is meaning there, it is a journey that the one needed to take to basically come to the point where you are today, and from there, the next leg of the journey begins. So everything has meaning, and but I think at the end of the day, we as long as everything has a your it's constructive and is taking you to a better place, you're learning and growing. I think everything is has meaning in it, basically. So you needed to go through that to arrive where you are today. Otherwise, you would be not here, you'd be somewhere else.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, if that makes sense. I have a tendency to ramble sometimes. I have to remind myself on podcasts, don't ramble.
No, I 100% do the same, and that's why I've been obsessed with that idea of the monks taking the vow of silence. It's like, if you just shut up, you'd probably be a lot happier. Like
Yes.
you've gotten yourself into so many different messes with these philosophical arguments, and now you have a career doing it, and it's just hilarious where words will take you.
Yes. And for so for you at the moment, you're finishing off your current book, which you've mentioned that you had a difficult time with it mid of last year. So your intention is to finish that book and then to sort of turn a new leaf, start a new adventure. Is that the idea?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Maybe get back into just creative writing, like doing some fiction or maybe making some music or art. That was something I used to do when I was younger, and it was something I really enjoyed, and it was actually the original thing I wanted to do with my life. I mean, I was always interested in these weird ideas, but I
Mm.
would incorporate them symbolically into fictional stories and songs and stuff. But at one point, for some reason, I just found it easier just to straight up say what I was thinking about.
Yeah. So, well, I'm looking forward to your next book. I know it's a labor of love in so many different ways. What happens with your the podcast? What if you published 2 episodes? So, do you still have a vision for that, or you're going to sort of now that you're going down a different path slightly, that's going to also take a different shape or form?
No, I plan to get back on there and start ranting, but like I said, this book is taking up so much of my time. Honestly, it's unhealthily taking up my time. Like I wake up, I write, and then go to sleep. And I try and make it to the gym. I try and eat one meal. but I literally do not stop all day. And it wasn't always like that. Like I said, I had extreme writer's block for maybe like 6 months, and I was completely paralyzed basically, um, in terms of writing during that month of August when things got super duper dark.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, so like I've just it's just been pouring out of me finally, once again. And but yeah, so it's hard to juggle a, all the different projects I want to do at once, because this is my days are literally just writing.
Mm.
I was just writing before we got on this podcast. But once it's finally done, I will have all the time in the world to, talk about different things, get on some more interviews, and just do my own creative projects that actually bring happiness rather than crazy thoughts.
Yeah, because one of the things that occurred to me as you were talking is that, because correct me if I'm wrong, but you're a Scorpio, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm a Scorpio as well, and one of the tendencies we tend to have is that for us, every life is an all or nothing proposition. So when we do something,
Mm-hmm.
we
Mm-hmm.
do it like immersively. We
We
think
dive head first into the deep end.
yes, and what that can do is, and we're also very well, I am at least quite emotional about everything. Like I'm very emotionally connected to the things that I do in my life because I do them very sincerely. So there is that aspect as well, that it can become all immersive. And sometimes if like in your case, what you're saying, the subject matter isn't the most palatable one, not very a pleasant one, that it really affects you. So I can imagine that it would affect a different personality type in a different way than it would affect somebody, who's like us in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like, some people can be writing and it doesn't really affect them as much because they're not sort of fully immersed in it, as we can be. So I wonder.
Right. And some of these chapters where I'm telling personal stories, it's like reliving through them over again. Like I feel like I'm in that point in my life again.
Mm,
And sometimes that's really, really fun. It's an awesome escape, I guess. I mean, to write about something and totally relive the experience.
mm,
But also, when talking about the dark experiences, you go back to that same place. And the subject matter also is just, some of it's very creepy, some of it's very awesome and amazing, but you can't have one without the other. So I'm trying to make it as palatable as possible and just show people both ends of the spectrum, and ultimately what it is to be beyond duality. I guess I think that's the end of the book, really. But in order to actually show people what that is, I think I had to live it. I think I had to
mm.
experience it and not just talk about it.
Well, that sounds
So yeah.
amazing. Yeah, I mean that's what we all want to know. What's at the end of this duality, and how do we, what can we do? Because I'm a very solution oriented person. So when I'm go down these, seeking truth and all of that, I really want to know what can we do with it at the end of it. What's the practical application? And yeah, so I'm very much looking forward to your new book. I think it'll be sounds amazing. You've put so much of your heart and soul into it by the sounds of it. So I guess this will be a good place to end the podcast on that note. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, Nick. Please tell everyone where they can follow you. I know you have a big presence on Twitter, and how they can purchase your current books, the Saturn Time Cube Simulation and the Aquarian Singularity.
Yeah, so NickHinton, on Instagram and Twitter. And if you want my book, just DM me. I'm selling them through myself because I'm printing them myself. I plan on getting the first two on Amazon so people overseas can buy them more easily, very soon. And yeah, that's about it. I used to have a website, but it's a mess and I don't have the time to fix it right now. And yeah.
No, that sounds good. So I'll put all the links below in the description bar. So again, thank you so much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure. Like I said, you're one of my number one guests to be on my podcast when I was still planning my podcast journey. So I was so excited to speak with you today. I know you're busy, so I really appreciate that you've made the time. And and I really enjoyed talking about Jesus with you. I think that's a common
theme that we have, that we have that curiosity about him and how amazingly he has. I actually know quite a few people who've had experiences with Jesus when they really needed help. So he's very busy. Jesus is very busy from what I can tell. So please doing the wonderful work that you're doing. I think you're a real light in this world, and you're very young, and you've gone down these amazing journeys at a very young age, and I think that gives you a head start into make so much of your life at a very young age. You're very evolved. So yeah, please keep up the good work.
Well, thank you for that, and thank you for having me. It was an awesome conversation, and it was very easy to do, which is not always the case. So thank you for that.
So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Nick is such an amazing synthesizer of complex concepts and ideas that it never ceases to amaze me, the clarity with which he's able to express these ideas. I really love his principle of being mystically agnostic, allowing one to entertain many different models of reality without being tethered to any particular one. The reason I love this so much is because it allows one to exercise their imagination, keep an open mind, and acknowledge the fact that some things we can never really know for sure. In the meantime, if you enjoyed this episode, please follow Nick's work at his Twitter account at Nick Hinton, where he's always posting the most interesting, mind-bending information. Purchase his books Saturn Time Cube Simulation and the Aquarian Singularity, which you can purchase by directly messaging him on his Twitter account. Listen to his podcast called What If, available on Spotify. Also, check out Institute of Folly, a Reddit organization that Nick created to measure belief systems' effects on consensus reality. I'll provide all the links below in the description bar. So until next time, thanks for watching.